Yes, it looks good.
Okay, perfect. All right. So today we are going to be talking about resilience. And we'll go through what resilience is, and a skill that we can use to build resilience. And I hope that, like Miranda said, you will all feel comfortable interacting within the chat, within our meeting. If you want to turn your camera on, if you have a question, please feel free to ask live as well. It's important for us to have that engagement, and I think everybody will get as much as possible out of the class if we have that engagement. And I will do my best to make sure that we're all having a great time and going to learn some great skills too. So before I get started, as Miranda introduced me, I'm one of the program coordinators for Wellness and Work Life. I previously have worked with athletes and soldiers in the U.S. Army on resilience skills. I have a background in sport and performance psychology. So really helping people get their mind to work for them rather than against them, or figuring out, what is going on in your mind to make sure that your your body is working the way you need to, especially as an athlete, or you're not getting in the way of yourself as you're performing whatever you're going to perform. And you'll get to know as well that I believe that anything is a performance. So whether we're thinking about going to work every single day, or coming home and being in front of our family and friends, we want to be at our best within that performance as much as possible throughout our lives. So let's get started. I would love for everybody to picture, either close your eyes and picture someone in front of you, or just think of someone you consider a high level performer. And as you're thinking of this person, it can be an athlete, it can be some famous person like a celebrity, actor, singer, great coach, anybody that comes to mind, whether you know them personally or not. And once that person is in your mind, write down either on a piece of paper or within the chat everything that helps this person perform at a high level. There are no wrong answers here. They can be, one or two words, but just think about all the things, all the factors that go into this person at a high level. What helps them be their very best when it matters the most? All right, I'm already seeing some answers, which is great. So focus, preparation, determination, repetition definitely goes with preparation, commitment, dedication. I'm seeing a lot of practice, definitely. Internal motivation, love that. Internal motivation is huge, especially when we want to take action for practice, for focus, for that dedication. And then also the people around them to support, definitely support. Asking for help, I love that. Being able to be at your best, but still wanting to get better. Energy, motivation, mindset, belief, exercise, good nutrition, definitely. So many great factors: strength, persistence, resilience, perfect, timely factor. Great. So as you can see, this entire list, there's some similarities that we're all picking out I'm willing to bet that we're all probably thinking of someone different. We're not all talking about the same person, but there are a lot of similarities and factors that go into a high level performer, whether they're an athlete, whether they're like a high level surgeon or a celebrity. So a lot of the things that you all had put in your chat too are going to be within someone's control. So I had also wrote down some of the things that we typically think of as we think of high performers. So we see the same things in the chat: dedication, hours of practice, belief in yourself, the support from a coach or a mentor, work ethic, commitment, drive, willingness to try, learning from failure. All of these things are absolutely factors that go into a high level performer on a daily basis. There are also some things that we may see that help them be a high level performer that are just gifts that they're born with. So like talent or ability, let's say a like Michael Jordan, basketball player, he's tall. Um, he's born being tall, like that's just set in stone. He can't control that. It helps him be maybe a good basketball player when he was younger. But then as he moves up the levels and becomes a professional athlete, that doesn't matter as much. The things that matter are the things within someone's control, the things that are able to be practiced. So rather than a gift that you're born with, the things that make a high level performer high level are the things that are skills to be deliberately practiced. And that's what we want to think of when we think of resilience as well. So it's something that we can practice deliberately and intentionally to get better at. And it absolutely is a pathway to consistent, excellent performance. So I love that someone had already put down that their high level performance they had thought of is resilient. Because that is absolutely correct. High level performers are able to be resilient and their most consistent performance as often as possible. And then more formally, the definition of resilience is the ability to bounce back in the face of adversity, challenges, and change. And as we're thinking about being our most resilient self, within our performance, within our lives, we want to think of ourselves as being able to thrive. So when we're winding down at the end of the night, we don't want to say, I survived today. I got through the day. Yes, that may happen on occasion, but in general, and as consistently as possible, we want to make sure that we are thriving in our lives and not just surviving. And that is possible with practicing resilience. So before we dive into how to practice resilience and build resilience, let's make sure that we're all on the same page about what resilience is. It's absolutely a buzzword right now and a topic because there are so many things that are changing. We're facing adversities every single day, challenges that we have to deal with. So I think we talk about resilience in a great way. And we say, we need to be resilient, but we also may not always understand what resilience really means. So feel free to react with like a thumbs up or a thumbs down, like smiley face or a clap if it's true, or use the chat, whatever you feel comfortable with. So the first question, the first statement is true or false. You either have it or you don't. You either have resilience or you don't have resilience. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of false. Yep. Okay, absolutely. So that is false. And we just talked about that. We just talked about how it's a skill to be deliberately practiced. That's kind of a freebie. I gave you that one. But I'm happy to see that you're all paying attention so far. The next statement is you have to experience something significant to build resilience, What do we think? True or false? Okay, I'm seeing some false. Yep, absolutely. You're all correct on that as well. That statement is false. So a lot of time we think of someone who has gone through a lot of turmoil in their life that is extremely resilient. They've come out, the other side being their best self, a famous person. But in reality, we don't have to experience something significant. We don't have to experience a significant amount of trauma to build resilience. Even the small setbacks or daily demands that we deal with on a daily basis are going to help us build resilience. And those small daily factors are actually going to help you build a stronger sense of resilience over time because they're more manageable than a major setback or major life event that takes a lot of time to get through and can come with other kinds of implications. So we want those small daily setbacks. We want those demands to be placed on us so that we can build resilience. We're depositing small practices of resilience within our daily lives so that we can manage anything no matter what happens. All right, the next statement is if you practice resilience, you can still express emotions. True or false? All right. True. Love it. You all are absolutely crushing this game. I'm very proud. So, absolutely correct. If you practice resilience, you can still express emotions. The old way of thinking of resilience when it first kind of came onto the scene was that being resilient means that you're invincible, you're invulnerable, you're like a stone wall, nothing penetrates you. When in reality, being resilient means that you can still feel all the emotions that you're going to go through. You're probably going to show some emotion as well. You're not pushing it down or pushing it aside. You're being composed, but you're also able to regulate those emotions in an effective way, using your emotions for you to get through those challenges, those setbacks that you may need to, that you're facing. It also means being resilient means that you're allowed to slow down. You're not going to have all the answers. It's not always going to be the prettiest way to get out of something or the smoothest way to go to push through a barrier. It is going to be messy. It is going to not be pretty all the time. But the biggest thing is that you're bouncing back and you're able to get through a challenge that you're facing. All right, last one. You can be resilient and rely on others. True or false? All right, true. Yes. So this one is massive. Being resilient doesn't mean that you have to do everything on your own. Connection is incredibly important for us as human beings to go through life, to be our best selves. We also need to rely on others. So if you think about the movie Castaway, I'm assuming everybody has seen it, but Tom Hanks' character had a major setback. He needed to experience and develop and show his resilience to survive on the island by himself. And even in that situation, he created Wilson to have that connection. He needed some kind of social support to survive. And that is all absolutely part of being resilient. So good job, everybody. You all passed 100% of the resilience true or false game. So that means we can move on to the next section. We're going to go through a little bit more on the background of resilience and then get into one of the skills that you can use to practice your resilience. So Most of the resilience that you're going to hear about, definitely in this presentation and then throughout your discussions or wherever else you hear from resilience, is going to be based in positive psychology from researchers at the University of Pennsylvania. And it's also based in cognitive behavioral science. So where I was trained as a master resilience trainer, there were 6 competencies and 12 skills that you were able to practice to build resilience. So the 6 competencies are self-awareness, self-regulation, optimism, mental agility, strengths of character, and connection. And of course, within those 6 competencies, those 12 skills are going to be laid out for you. So we're not going to go through all of them today. We're just going to focus on one of those competencies and one skill within that competency. And so the point of being resilient is to build cognitive and emotional well-being, to be your best, consistent, excellent performer at all times. When we think about our performances or the things that we need to do throughout our day that we want to be at our best at, we never want to be surprised by how we react to certain things. We never want to be caught off guard. We always want to feel like we're as consistent as we expect everybody else to be that we work with or that we're around, our friends and our family. So that cognitive and emotional well-being is incredibly important, especially when we are in an environment at work and at home throughout our lives where there's constant demand being placed on us. Things are changing almost daily, if not hourly, which it can be really difficult to exercise that kind of well-being or focus on it at all. Most of those demands that are being placed on us are outside of our control. So they're not within our control, which can make it even more difficult to feel like we can push through them. But the good news is that we always have control over our thoughts. So our thoughts also influence how we feel and how we act. And this connection is illustrated with this model. And this model that we're going to go through allows us to build awareness of not only what we have control over, but also our thought patterns and how we react to certain things or how we may react to certain things, so that we are not surprised by our reaction. Like I said, being consistent is one of our goals to be resilient. So building that awareness is going to help us have that resilience skill so that we can deal with whatever comes our way. This model was developed by Dr. Albert Ellis, based in cognitive behavioral science. It's used in cognitive behavioral therapy in psychology backgrounds. But essentially, it just shows how effective and how influential our thoughts are. So we have our activating event. This activating event is going to be some kind of challenge, adversity, or obstacle that you face. So it's just the facts, something that happens to you. From that activating event, we are going to have some thoughts. So our thoughts are what we say to ourselves in the heat of the moment. So again, that activating event happens in the heat of the moment. We have those thoughts and our interpretation of what is going on. And then from those thoughts drives our consequences. So what we think drives how we feel and what we do. For example, I have been dealing with car issues since the beginning of the year, so all month. I spent a lot of time going to the shop, getting my car looked at. My engine light was on, so I'd spent a lot of hours waiting for it to be fixed and a lot of money to be fixed. Thankfully, it was all fixed. And then 3 days later, my check engine light came back on. So if we think of that check engine light coming on for the second time as my activating event, you know, I had some thoughts about that. So in the moment, my heat of the moment thought was, what the heck? Are you serious? I can't catch a break with this car. And then as a result of that thought, I was annoyed. I could feel like my heartbeat, my heart was racing a little bit. I was frustrated, and I wasn't able to focus on what I needed to do throughout the day at work. And I wasn't able to show up in my relationships because I was distracted and frustrated with my car. So in that situation, a lot of the time we fall into the trap of kind of like a victim mentality of this thing happened to me and it made me feel a certain way or it made me think a certain way. Similarly, we can have someone tell us something and kind of put the blame on them of this person said this to me and they made me do this, this, and this. When in reality, it's what we think about that event or what that person had said to us that drives what we feel and what we do. So if I were to give up all control and say my check engine light came on, and as a result, that made me like not be productive at work and be short-tempered with my friends. That's actually not correct, and it doesn't allow me to understand where I have control in this situation, which is my thoughts. To further build awareness and fully understand that thought consequence connection or thought outcome connection, let's break down the consequences box into 3 separate sections. And I'm going to pause right here just for a moment. If you scroll up to the beginning of the chat, Miranda had dropped in a PDF file that has a worksheet where you can follow along if you want virtually, or you can print it out later on. That is available to you as we're going through, so that you can reflect on your own experiences as well. Okay, so as we're looking at the thought outcome connection, we can break down the consequences box into our feelings and emotions, our physical state, and then the outcome or our behaviors. So again, going back to that check engine light example, it's not the check engine light turning on for the second time that made me feel frustrated, that made my heart race, that made my face, red, and that made me be short-tempered and not focus on work. It was the thoughts that I had about this activating event that drove my feelings, physical state, and my behavior. So when we think about resilience and we build awareness of where we have control, we always have control over our thoughts, and in turn, we always have control over our feelings and our actions or reactions. So that means that we have the power to be as effective as possible, no matter what happens to us, no matter what activating event happens throughout the day, no matter what change or barrier comes our way. If we're able to understand where we have control within our thoughts, within how we are feeling, and within our actions after the fact, or how we attack that issue or challenge, we are able to be our best resilient self, and feel like we have control over the situation, even when that situation is uncontrollable at the start. Of course, not all feelings or not all thoughts and outcomes are ineffective, right? That example that I had used, ineffective, not helpful for me to go about my day with thoughts and those emotions and physical state in the way that I had reacted. If every single thought that we had or every reaction we had about some kind of event that we experienced, we probably wouldn't have jobs, we wouldn't have friends, we wouldn't have families, which means that we can still have effective thought outcome connections. So for example, we're going to talk about one effective thought outcome connection, and then same activating event, but how you can think about it in a different way to show how much it does change your outcome. So I am a big runner. I ran the Chicago Marathon in October of last year. I was feeling fantastic the entire way, absolutely loving the crowds, was not listening to music at all because I just didn't need it. I was just soaking in all of the energy, on track for my goal. Then I hit mile 22 and my legs started cramping like I have never felt before. Um, so in that moment, that is my activating event. My activating event is legs cramped, mile 22 of the marathon. If I were to think, well, that's great, I'm finished, my goal, it doesn't matter anymore, I'm not going to reach it. That thought would have drove those feelings and emotions of frustration, being really emotional, being defeated. Physically, I would have felt really tense. Muscles were going to be tense. My breathing would have been irregular. My form probably wouldn't have been as good as I needed it to be. And as a result of feeling those emotions and that physical state, I would have expended more energy than I needed to, because I needed to conserve all the energy that I could to finish strong. And I would not have reached my goal. I would not have been able to be in the moment and enjoy it. All because I had thought, well, that's great. My goal is done. You know, that's all I can do. So that's an example of an ineffective thought outcome connection, all because I had reacted or interpreted my legs cramping at mile 22 ineffectively with that thought. Same activating event, completely different thought. So legs cramping up at mile 22 is my activating event. If I had thought, you know what, I've trained for this. This is exactly the moment that I can push through. That would drive my feelings and emotions of confidence. I may still be a little frustrated because I didn't want this to happen, but my physical state would have been more relaxed. My breathing would have been more in control. And as a result, I would still be able to experience all the energy, all the marathon magic of a big marathon like that, and finish strong as I could. So as you can see, again, same activating event, completely different thoughts and completely different emotions, physical state, completely different reactions. And because we have control over what we think, we also have that control and power to deal with any kind of situation, especially if it's negative or something that we really truly don't want to deal with at the moment. Now, this is easier said than done, of course, and it's a lot easier to reflect on these situations after the fact. In the moment, these things happen so fast. Those heat of the moment thoughts happen in a second. And so this is where using that worksheet that we had posted in the chat that I see Miranda had just posted again, so now it's at the bottom of the chat, thank you. Being able to reflect on these situations and break down your thoughts, your emotions, and physical state, and what outcome you had, or what behaviors you had experienced, will allow you to build that awareness, like we're talking about, but then also help yourself figure out the thought patterns that you typically fall into so that next time something like this happens, you can think, okay, I actually have control over my thoughts in this moment. That means that I have control over how I'm feeling and thinking and or feeling, and then also what I'm going to be doing rather than just reacting heat of the moment. Where we tend to get tripped up is when something happens to us or something we experience makes us react in an out of proportion way, or we have a reaction that may surprise us. So as I'm going through this, think back to yourself, maybe the last couple months. Did you ever have an experience where you were surprised by how you reacted? It wasn't, it was kind of out of character for you to react in that way. Just be thinking about that. It's going to help you later on reflect and identify what we're going to be talking about. So if you are able to come up with something, or as you're coming up with something, an experience like that, you may have hit an iceberg. In that moment, an iceberg may have been hit for you. So we have our picture of an iceberg here. I'm sure you've all seen this in one way or another. What you see at the surface and what you see below is going to be different. So we can think of the water line as our level of awareness. This is in terms of how we think about our thoughts, how we think about our lives. The level of awareness is going to be at the water line. Anything above the surface is going to be easy to identify and tune into. So these are going to be those heat of the moment thoughts that we've talked about. Those are going to be also some of your core values and beliefs. So if you think about some of the things that are important to you, some of the values that you try to live by, you can easily name them, right? They're right on the surface. They're above the surface. If you were to ask people, tell me what you think my core value and belief is, they're probably going to say, well, you live your life, revolving around your family. So I would say family is important to you. That's one of your core values and beliefs. So there are going to be a lot of core values and beliefs, thoughts that we have, things within our control that are going to be at our awareness and easily, you can easily spot them. There is a spot on your worksheet on page 2 where you can record some of your above the surface core values and beliefs icebergs. And then I will also just point out that as we're talking about this, remember that not all core values and beliefs are going to be counterproductive or wrong. We're talking about hitting an iceberg in a way that elicits an out of proportion response or something that surprises you. But there are a lot of icebergs that are going to be effective for you, which we will talk about in just a minute. So what we don't see are a lot of other core values and beliefs. These are the things that we think how the world should be, how people should act, or how I should be perceived by other people. So there's a huge mass of ice, if we're talking about an iceberg, that is within the water under the surface that we're not able to see. And while we're not able to name these things, if we think about our own core values and beliefs, these are the things that drive certain behaviors for us, or those reactions that we're talking about that may be surprising. And when we're in situations where these icebergs are hit, you can kind of think of hitting a nerve. And as you're reflecting back on a situation where a nerve has been hit, we can also say an iceberg has probably been hit. We typically have those out of proportion reactions and emotions that can surprise us. You may not feel in control, which is basically the opposite of what we're talking about. We want to be in control as much as possible, or identify where we have control so that we can be not surprised by our reaction, but we're able to be at our best. So we need to be aware, be able to take a hard look at those core values and beliefs that fuel those out of proportion emotions and reactions, and be aware of those very firmly held icebergs that are below the surface as well as above the surface that drive those emotions, reactions, and behaviors. So these core values and beliefs above the surface and below the surface are going to come from a lot of different sources. They can come from our experiences throughout our entire life. They can come from the people who raised us and the people who raised them, kind of passed down generally generationally to what you're taught as you grow up, what's important to you, what you're supposed to be valuing. They can come from your life lessons, previous experiences that you learned a lot from, and they can also come from where you grew up. So a lot of different ways that you can learn core values and beliefs, but it is absolutely a fluid part of our lives. We're constantly maybe something that you valued 10 years from 10 years ago isn't as much of a value now. So that's also a good thing to remember, that these are fluid as we're looking at a hard look. They're not set in stone. And it's going to be helpful to understand that it's not all of who you are, especially if they are getting in the way of you being at your best and in your relationships. So in order to identify these icebergs, identify these core values and beliefs that may fuel your out of proportion emotions and reactions, again, it's best to be done after the fact, to reflect on these situations, and be able to build awareness of how we react in those situations. So we're going to go back to that thought outcome connection model. We're going to we're going to look at the activating event, whatever happened that fueled that or out of proportion reaction. As you're thinking about and reflecting on the situation for yourself, it may be helpful to skip the thought box to begin with and go straight to the emotions and their physical state, because we're talking about out of proportion reactions. We're talking about things that, maybe have surprised you. You're absolutely going to be remembering those emotions and reactions over the thoughts that you had in that situation. Because in any situation or any experience, we remember how we felt. That's going to be the strongest thing. So feel free to skip around as you're doing this on your own. Fill in what you remember in detail so that you can build as much awareness as possible. And then make sure to go back and think about, what did I think in that moment? Completely raw, unfiltered, heat of the moment thought. That's going to help you be the most reflective and help you figure out what's going to help you be your resilient self. So if I were to do this, I'll give you an example because I think that really helps. Back in around this time last year, actually, I was training to run a marathon to qualify for Boston. So big goal for me. It was down in Gulf Shores, and I grew up in New York. So my parents were going to fly down from New York to visit me. A couple weeks before that race, my mom had called me and said, I might have to stay home. Our dog needs to get this growth removed from his eye, so he needs surgery. I can't leave him alone. So I won't be able to come down. So that activating event is going to be my mom telling me that she probably won't come support me at my marathon for their dog. So in the heat of the moment, I thought, are you serious? He's a dog. I'm your daughter. And that fueled feelings and emotions of annoyance and a little bit of anger. My physical state, my muscles tensed up, my teeth clenched. I was definitely more tense. My face felt hot and red. And as a result of that heat of the moment thought and my emotions and reaction, I said, okay, whatever, and then hung up the phone, and didn't talk to her for about a week, which is unusual for me. I usually talk to my mom at least 3 to 4 times a week. So that reaction and not talking to her for that long, kind of cued me in to say, you know what, something something underlying maybe going on here. Some iceberg may have been hit in this moment. Let me figure out what's going on. So, in order to move from that heat of the moment thought to figure out what is going on under the surface, what kind of core values and beliefs that I holding on to that I may not even know right now, that's driving this emotion and reaction. So there's a series of questions that I would ask myself in this moment as I'm reflecting back, um, that will help me get to the root of this reaction. And you can do this on your own. You can ask yourself these questions. It's also helpful to have somebody who you trust ask these questions for you and have kind of a conversation about it. But essentially, you would say, what is the most upsetting part of your mom or your parents not coming down to to support you? And I would answer something along the lines of, well, it would be nice if they followed through on what they said they would do and support me. And then I would ask, what does that mean? What does supporting you mean? And I would say, being there for me in person, being committed to their word, and showing up for me in the moment. And then I could ask something like, what is the worst part of them not doing that? And then I would probably come up with something like, they have always been there for me. So not being there for me and feeling like they're choosing their dog over me for a very minor kind of surgery feels like they're not valuing me. And then assuming that that is true, what is so upsetting about that to me? And that kind of, again, tells me, family is always there to support. If they're not there to support me, it feels like they're not, part of family and upholding that value. So after you had asked those questions to yourself, or you had someone ask those questions to you, you're going to arrive at some kind of aha moment, and you'll know it when you are talking about it or you're writing it down and say like, yes, that is why I reacted in that way. That is my firmly held iceberg or core value and belief that got in the way or fueled that out of proportion reaction for me. And so for this, my iceberg is family sticks together, family supports each other, and does what they say they're going to do. And so because I have that firmly held belief and I reacted in that way, I could tell that, yes, it makes sense that I had an out of proportion reaction to not talk to my mom for about a week based on her not coming down, potentially. So then I would also ask myself, is that reaction, is this firmly held belief helpful or harmful in these situations? In this example, I would absolutely say that it was harmful. And if you think about this iceberg for me, family should be there for each other and support when you can and when you're available. And then not talking to my mom also goes against that belief. So I would absolutely say that I was not acting within that core value and belief. That was harmful for our relationship. It was harmful for me to continue preparing for the marathon because I was, so focused on not talking to her. So again, just building awareness of, is this core value and belief that I firmly hold that also fueled an out of proportion reaction helpful the way that I show up in life and in relationships, or is it harmful? Is it getting in the way? And so there's some other questions that you can ask yourself to evaluate this iceberg. And again, these questions are on the sheet that is in the chat. So feel free to save them. You can take a picture now if you want to the screen as well. But again, it really just goes back to building that awareness, building how you show up in your life and in these situations, especially when the situations are out of our control. Those demands are being placed on us. We want to be at our best, and we want to be aware of these icebergs that we firmly hold that may get in the way. Now, in relationships, personally, we may have a little more leeway. Typically, the people that we choose to be in our life or family is a little bit more understanding than people, at work. So again, it's extremely important to be aware of these firmly held beliefs and core values that you may hold that may fuel those out of proportion reactions, especially at work. Because we want to remain professional. We want to be able to show up as our best self. And icebergs can potentially get in the way. So as you're reflecting about a situation that has happened to you the reaction may have surprised you, and you're asking yourself these questions, you don't have to change, but it's really good to be aware of these things so that next time something like this happens, you learn from it and you're able to be aware. You're able to focus on your resilience or to build this skill so that you are able to be as consistent as possible and not be surprised by the way you're showing up or the way you're reacting. So in the next couple minutes or the last couple minutes, take some time to reflect, if you haven't already, on a situation that you didn't show up at your best. Maybe it surprised you. Definitely download the worksheet, print it off for yourself, multiple copies if you need to, and begin to practice the skill of self-awareness and detecting your icebergs. All right, we have 3 more classes that you can attend within this series. Like Miranda said, you'll receive 10 points for today's class and 10 points for each of the other classes in this series, as well as all the other wellness classes that we have this semester. But we'll be talking about 3 additional skills to build your resilience within the other 6 competencies. So you can really round out your resilience skills toolbox, or at least make it a little stronger for you so that you can be as resilient as possible. So hopefully you all can join us on the 14th of February, March 27th, and May 8th. All online again. You'll have a worksheet, the same, similar from today, to print off and help you practice these skills after the fact. And I am here if you have any questions, thoughts. Again, feel free to unmute yourself. I am going to stop sharing my screen.